paganism. So make sure you go check out right in the corner. I'll also have the link down in the description box below, where we've already addressed poor arguments such as Romans 14, Colossians 2. That's not what it means to me. God knows my heart. I'm redeeming it for Jesus. We've already covered this. So if you leave it down in my comments, I already know that you have not watched the videos. Stop wasting my time. If you want the information, just go watch the video, okay? Hey fam, it's Rachel. Today on Crack Your Bible, we are going to be discussing when was Jesus born, because today is Christmas, and this is a day that everybody tries to justify their paganism and their syncretism by saying, oh, we're celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. Y'all know that's a lie, because number one, this whole month we've been going through all of the various traditions associated with Christmas and showing how they all come from Nordic and Scandinavian paganism, which is where most Westerners are from. Convenient how everybody who is a Westerner or of European descent, they can pick out everybody else's paganism. Don't do yoga. Don't celebrate Islamic holidays. Don't be involved in the New Age. But all of a sudden, when you look at European paganism, oh, well, Jesus is redeeming that. It's intellectually dishonest and it's theologically inconsistent. But we have a problem because there's false teachers coming out saying that actually we can partake in these pagan festivals because Jesus actually was born on Christmas Day. And the reasoning that they'll use is they'll say, well, the early church claimed that Jesus was conceived on March 25th. Therefore, if you count out 9 months from then, you get December 25th. Oh, see, Jesus was born on December 25th. The problem is these people have no problem also admitting that the early church at the Council of Nicaea had no problem compromising on biblical days, so their dates can't be trusted for anything. For example, Constantine, at the Council of Nicaea, he wanted there to be a fixed date for Easter throughout his empire, the Byzantine Empire. And the leaders, they compromised. They did away with the biblical feast days, which we have the freedom in Christ to celebrate. We're not required to celebrate them, but if we want to celebrate something, we can celebrate any of these 7 biblical feast days. That does not include Purim or Hanukkah. Those are man-made holidays. And no, Jesus didn't celebrate Hanukkah. All it says is that Jesus was walking in Solomon's colonnade in winter during the Feast of Dedication. That's it. If I say I was walking to the grocery store in autumn during Halloween, that does not mean that I was celebrating Halloween. People need to stop with these logical leaps. Jesus did not celebrate Hanukkah. Anyway, so if we want to celebrate something, we have the 7 biblical feast days. But at the Council of Nicaea, these leaders, they acquiesced to Constantine, and they did away with not only Passover, which is a day, they did away with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a week, and they also did away with the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot. And they condensed all of this down into one day, and Constantine wanted it to be on a Sunday, and this is how we get Easter Sunday, a fixed date for Easter Sunday. It all had to do with compromise and getting rid of God's biblical feast days, which all point to Jesus. So, if they're willing to compromise and get rid of 3 biblical feast days, why would we trust them about when Jesus was conceived, especially when we see that Constantine had no problem compromising and doing things that would bolster his image in his own empire? If people had Saturnalia, December 25th, as a high holy day, it's not that difficult to count backwards 9 months and just say, oh, well, this is when Jesus was conceived. Isn't this convenient? We can still partake in our pagan Saturnalia. People, let's use logic. So today we are going to be going through the Bible, we're going to crack our Bible and see when was Jesus actually born. Now, honestly, I hate talking about when was Jesus born because it confuses people, because we know that scripture tells us in John 1:1 that in the beginning was a word, and the word was with God, and the word was God, and everything that was made was created through him, by him, and for him. Jesus is the mouthpiece of the triune God. He's always existed, and we see him throughout the Old Testament. We see him as Melchizedek, King of Righteousness. Melchizedek is just a title. We see the pre-incarnate Jesus came down. We see him throughout the Old Testament. So when we talk about, when was Jesus born? This confuses people, and people no longer understand that Jesus has always existed. He only became the Son positionally when he made himself subservient to the will of the Father and then took on a body of flesh by being born of Mary. He had to be born through a human being, Mary. She was a human being, so that he could then go on and experience all the trials and tribulations that human beings do, but without sinning, so that he could be a suitable sacrifice for the sins of the world. If he is human, fully God and fully human, and he's never known sin, then he can be the atoning sacrifice at Passover. But when we do away with God's holidays and we try to absorb paganism, things get convoluted, they get confused, and then also people don't understand how God has placed all of the stars in the sky as a sign. We don't understand how the biblical feast days all point to Jesus, so people are without excuse, and we can't even understand how much God loves us and cares for us, and how we can reflect on Jesus and all the good things that God has in store for us, and how he's prepared a way for us to come into a right standing relationship with a holy God when we look and celebrate these biblical feast days. Now, if you have followed this channel, again, remember we've already addressed garbage arguments that people make to try to justify their pagan holidays and their syncretism. So make sure you go check out right in the corner. I'll also have a link down in the description box below where we've already addressed poor arguments such as Romans 14, Colossians 2. That's not what it means to me. God knows my heart. I'm redeeming it for Jesus. We've already covered this. So if you leave it down in my comments, I already know that you have not watched the videos. Stop wasting my time. If you want the information, just go watch the video, okay? So let's jump right in and address these issues, because unfortunately, there are documentaries out there that try to explain when Jesus was born, such as the Star of Bethlehem documentary, but it's been debunked. People have gone into the software and shown that's not what it shows. And also, they do away with some historical records. They'll say, Herod was alive in 1 BC and still ruling. And we see that's not what history shows. Archaeology doesn't show this. We see that in 4 BC, Herod's sons were already ruling. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Herod was dead. But regardless, we see that Herod wasn't ruling after 4 BC. So a 1 BC date for the birth of Jesus doesn't work. And that's just one of many factors as to why the Star of Bethlehem documentary was debunked. But I first looked into it when I realized that his Roman timekeeping was off by 3 hours. So some of the things that he was saying just wasn't correct. So let's jump into when was Jesus born? And we are going to be discussing this by using 2 other videos that I have already filmed for Crack Your Bible. So let's jump in right now. So when discussing when was Jesus born, let's look at it from a biblical perspective. This is going to be a Genesis chapter 1 verse 14 perspective. So first of all, let me ask you, what is the purpose of stars? Why did God place stars in the sky? Well, if we look at Genesis 1 verses 14 through 15, it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate from day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so." So what is the purpose of stars? Well, number one, the stars proclaim God's story of creation. And number two, creation testified about Jesus since the beginning. We look at Psalm 19, verses 1 through 2. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." Romans 1:20 tells us, "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." So people, even if they didn't hear the prophets, if they never had access to scripture, they can see God's creation and they can see the constellations spelling out the story of our Messiah, Jesus Christ. So people are without excuse. So when we talk about stars and constellations, well, is naming stars biblical? Let's look and crack our Bible. Psalm 147:4 tells us, "He determines the number of the stars. He gives to all of them their names." Isaiah 40, verses 25 through 26 tells us, "To whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see. Who created these? He who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing." So God is saying that he himself brings out all of the stars by their number, and he calls them by their name. So are constellations biblical? Well, God lists the constellations by name. Over in Job 9:9, this is what we see. It says, "Who made the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades and the chambers of the south?" You know, even the prophets listed the constellations by name. Over in Amos 5:8, it says, "He who made the Pleiades and Orion and turns deep darkness into the morning and darkens the day into night, who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the surface. The Lord is his name." So the prophet Amos is talking about Pleiades and Orion. These are different star groupings known as constellations, and they have a name. So you might be wondering, okay, what is the difference between this? Like, it sounds really similar to astrology. So if we're talking about the biblical zodiac, we need to make a differentiation between zodiac signs and zodiac constellations, because zodiac signs, like your star sign, that would fall under astrology. Now, astronomy would be dealing with the biblical zodiac as far as the constellations. So what is the difference between astrology and astronomy? Well, astrology is the belief that the movement of the earth, rotating past other celestial bodies such as planets or stars, can divine your future or influence your life and destiny. Now, this is forbidden by God. Now, astronomy is a branch of natural science that studies the movement of celestial bodies and anything outside of the Earth's atmosphere, such as radiation, comets, galaxies, and gravity. And science is allowed by God. And we know that it's allowed by God because we can look at scripture. But first, let's look at what God says about astrology, which is forbidden. Over in Deuteronomy 4:19, it says, "And beware, lest you raise your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven." So it's saying don't bow down to these created things. God created them. Beware. But about astronomy, which is science, we see that this is allowed, because over in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 2, we know that the wise men, or the magi, they used astronomy to find Jesus. There was some sort of supernatural or astronomical sign in the heaven that they knew about, and they knew to follow it to Bethlehem to find Jesus so that they can worship him. So over there in Matthew 2, it says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born, King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him.'" So if God placed the constellations in the sky for signs, they reveal knowledge, we should look to see if we can decipher their meaning. In this picture, we can see the constellation Orion. Now, we see other constellations throughout the sky during important biblical days. For example, Libra, the scales. This is where the sun is passing through the constellation of Libra during the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. This is a day of judgment. During Passover, when the Lamb without blemish was sacrificed so that death could pass over us, and when Jesus, the Lamb of God, was sacrificed, we see the ram or the lamb, Aries, in the sky. We also see Taurus, which is the bull or the ox, and this is the day that Noah got off the ark after the flood and sacrificed to God. So how does this all work? Well, let's look at biblical timekeeping, because the sun appears to pass through all of this biblical zodiac, these constellations, over the course of the year. So the earth, we know, rotates on its axes, and as the earth is rotating around its axes, it is also rotating around the sun. And as the earth rotates around the sun, because of the Earth's position, it looks as if the sun is passing through different groupings of stars, these constellations, and that's how we get the zodiac constellation. For example, in July, August, it looks as if the sun is passing through the constellation of Leo. Now, there's another phenomenon that goes on, and you might say, like, isn't the sky the exact same as it was in Jesus' day? Well, yes, but we have to take into the account the rotation of the earth. Remember, the earth is rotating on its own axes, and it makes it look as if the sun is no longer passing through the constellations at the same time due to a phenomenon known as a precessional. Now, ancient astronomers were unaware of the precessional, so they didn't factor this in, but again, we don't have to worry about this because the constellations and their times are specifically based off of the times when Jesus walked the earth. Now, for a little bit of information about the precessional, we know that the earth wobbles around its axes due to the gravitational pull of the moon on the earth's equatorial bulge. We know that the earth is not a perfect sphere. It kind of bulges out at the equator, and because the moon rotates around the earth, there's a gravitational pull as well as the earth rotating on its axes, so it doesn't form a perfect circle. It's not rotating in a perfect circle. So this wobble causes a change of 1 degree about every 70 years in our view from the earth of the stars. So it looks slightly 1 degree off every 70 years. But we really don't need to worry about this in the big scheme of things, because a full rotation of this earth wobble would take 25,800 years. So keep that in mind, that these zodiac constellations are based off of what the sky looked like in Jesus's day. You don't have to worry about any of the changes because our dates associated with the constellations are specifically based off of what the sky looked like in Jesus's day. So even though it might be a little different today where the sun looks like it's passing through, we are specifically going off of what the sky looked like and where the sun was passing through in Jesus's day. And it's just very convenient that we still use those dates today. And even people who do astrology still use those dates today. There's one other thing that I would like you to consider, and that is the leap month. Now you might be saying, what are you talking about? A leap month? We have a leap day, February 29th, every 4 years. Okay, well, let's talk about that. So it takes the Earth approximately 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45 seconds to circle once around the sun. However, the Gregorian calendar, or the modern calendar, only has 365 days in a year. If we didn't add a leap day on February 29th, about every 4 years, we'd lose almost 6 hours off of our calendar every single year. If you add that up over the course of, 100, 200 years, all of a sudden you're losing like whole days off of the calendar. So it really skews things. This is why we add in a leap day. But the biblical calendar is different than the Gregorian calendar. And rather than adding an additional day every 4 years, the biblical calendar has a leap month, which is Adar 2. And years with this extra month are called a Shana Me'uberet, or in English, a pregnant year. So please keep in mind this leap month, if you would like to call it that, the Shana Me'uberet, or a pregnant year. Now, I've already discussed it in a video, so let me just show it to you really quick, just a quick clip, so that you can understand why we have a Shana Me'uberet. So, from the first day of the first month of Noah's 600th year, then you go 46 days forward, and you're going to have the start of the flood. Now, from the start of the flood all the way down to the dry land, so first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, from that first day to the next first day is 385 days. What? Since when are years 385 days? I will tell you when. It's called Shana Me'uberet, which is a pregnant year. Now, this happens 7 times in the span of 19 years. So a little over once every 3-ish years. And this is because the Jewish calendar is a lunar solar calendar. So, for example, you have new moons, which is the rotation of the moon around the earth. But then we have a solar calendar, which is what we go off of in like the Gregorian calendar. So that's Earth's rotation around the sun, which is one calendar year, one solar year. Now, if you just go off of a lunar calendar like Muslims do, your holidays will fall in different times of the year. So, for example, in 2017, Ramadan fell in June this year. And I'm like, isn't Ramadan like super early? Because I know in other years it's in August, September, October. But because you don't have a correction of matching up the lunar year with the solar year, you start getting holidays falling in different seasons. And the Jewish calendar, we don't want that. We want the holidays to happen in the correct season that they originally fell in. So you have this correction, a leap year, but instead of having a leap day like the Gregorian calendar has, they have a leap month because there's a correction of 11 1/4, I believe, days that happens where the lunar and solar calendars don't match up. So to correct it, every 3-ish years or 7 times every 19 years, you're going to have this Shana Me'uberet, which is the pregnant year. Okay, now that you guys are familiar with a pregnant year, let's talk about the fact that Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. Because, number one, a Roman census would not take place in winter. It is the most difficult time to traverse the Mediterranean Sea in winter or cross if everybody is having to go back to their own hometown. Luke 2 shows us people had to travel back for a census to their own hometown. You're not going to have thousands of people traveling in the middle of winter. Second point is the shepherds with their flocks. December in Israel is just too wet and too cold to be outside overnight with the flocks. Remember, the angel appeared to the shepherds in the field. And then number 3, if we go back and look at constellations, Capricorn is the constellation directly overhead during Christmas or during December 25th. And this represents a half goat, half fish. If the stars in the sky are to tell the story of creation and the coming Messiah, best believe Jesus isn't being born under a hybrid Nephilim sign. If I was a betting woman, I would say this is probably when the Genesis 6 demonic incident took place, where the watchers or the fallen angels went into the daughters of human beings and had children with them, the Nephilim, the mighty men of old, men of renown. These are the hybrid giants, and we know because we've read scripture that there were giants after the flood. There was not a second incursion. It's just those who had corrupted all flesh and mated with aquatic creatures and created these hybrid Nephilim. They would have been able to survive the flood because Noah and his family, they were pure in their generation. They had not been corrupted by these watchers, but again, aquatic animals would have existed, and we see in Mesopotamian and Sumerian literature that they talk about these half fish, half human beings coming up out of the Abzu, and this is where they started to worship. So we see this is where the giants would have come from after the flood. Giants like Goliath, giants like the ones who were in the land of Israel when Joshua and the other spies went into the land. This is where they would have come from. So if I had to bet, the watchers mating with women probably first came down and created these hybrids under the sign of Capricorn in December. And it's funny because so many of these pagan festivals celebrating these pagan hybrid gods fall under this hybrid demonic sign. Now, a lot of people will say, hold on. Doesn't the course of Abijah prove that Jesus was also born on December 25th? No, it doesn't, because the courses were set in the first temple period. Remember, King David was going to build the temple, but he had shed too much blood, so it went to his son Solomon, and Solomon was the one who built the temple. And we know that God's people split in two because they wanted to worship God in pagan ways. King Jeroboam led Israel, the kingdom of the north, into idolatry by, instead of having people worship at the temple in Jerusalem, he set up a golden calf at Bethel and one at Dan and created his own festivals and said, this is where we're going to worship Yahweh. Once at Bethel and Dan so that the money wouldn't go to Jerusalem. So we know that God, after so much idolatry and so much sin, God had the temple destroyed and the people sent off into Babylonian captivity. And this is where the priestly courses ended. Now we know that King Herod, the same King Herod that we're talking about with the birth of Jesus Christ, we know that he built a new temple, the second temple period, and there's no way that he had installed the same priestly courses because King Herod did whatever he wanted to do. King Herod installed a former king as high priest. And then in 30 BC, he had Hyrcanus II deposed. He had him removed. He put him to death. But King Herod also installed his own brother as high priest over the Jewish temple, and his name was Aristobulus III. So we see that instead of going by God's laws, King Herod had no problem doing whatever he wanted to do and installing whomever he pleased in the temple. So he was not going off of the pre-Babylonian exile records or laws when he built his second temple to God. So let's remember the courses of Abijah are irrelevant. We know that the early church who compromised on Easter whatever they claim about, when was Jesus conceived is irrelevant, because they've already shown that they're willing to compromise and do away with Jesus's other biblical feasts. So let's move on and let's start calculating when Jesus was born. Now, I don't celebrate Christmas, so it just kind of crept up on me like, oh, I haven't talked about Christmas and people want to know about that. And I haven't done a video about why I don't celebrate it, but it's the same lines as my Thanksgiving video and my Halloween video. We don't repurpose paganism to worship God. So God has given us the days that he wants us to celebrate. Christmas is not one of them. Even Jesus' birthday is not one of them, because it is very convoluted to try to figure it out. But that's what we are going to try to attempt today. And, well, there is a very popular theory stating that we can figure out when Jesus was born based off of when his uncle Zechariah served in the temple. Because Zechariah served in the temple, and then Gabriel came and said, hey, you're going to have a son. He was struck with being mute. The next week, after he's done serving, his wife Elizabeth gets pregnant, and then 6 months later, Mary becomes pregnant. And so there is a 6-month difference between John the Baptist and Jesus. So people will say, okay, well, Zechariah is from the division of Abijah, so he must have been serving during the 8th week. So let's count off one more week. That's when he goes home to Elizabeth. Now count off another 40 weeks. That's when John the Baptist is born. And add in another 26 weeks, and that's when Jesus is born. But I've done the calculations. I'm like racking my brain all night, wondering, okay, did I do something wrong? These numbers aren't matching up. And all of a sudden, Jesus is born in August, he's born in January, he's born all over the place when I try to figure it out based off of the calculations of the division of Abijah serving. And there's something that you guys need to understand, because a Jewish year is 51 weeks. And there are 24 divisions of priests, and each one serves for 1 week. And that is a Shabbat to Shabbat. And then they get to go home. And they do this 2 times a year. So they serve twice under their division head, and then there's another 3 times they serve during the year when all 24 divisions come to Jerusalem and they all serve together. So each division actually ends up serving 5 times. So I've calculated every possible date of when John the Baptist could have been conceived between 5 BC and 1 BC, using every single one of these dates that Zechariah would have been serving in the temple, and none of them are matching up. And I'm like, God, please just help me. I can't figure this out. Like, what is going on? It's like 3 in the morning. I'm so tired. My video is going to be up late. And it hit me. We can't use the date that Abijah's division was serving, because during the Babylonian exile, and because of the Maccabees, when they were ruling during the silent period, which is the hundreds of years between the Old and New Testament, there were no divisions serving. So once the divisions came back to worship in Herod's temple, those divisions were done away with. So we can't say that Zechariah was serving in the 8th week. So that completely changes everything. So once I got rid of that notion, I decided I had to do something different. And I thought that maybe I was wrong in my Rosh Hashanah video, that Jesus wasn't conceived in September, but I found out I was right. I was correct. So we have to base John's conception date based off of the signs that God puts in the sky. So that's what I did. And when I did that, everything just busted wide open. I was shocked. To figure out when John the Baptist was conceived, we need to see when was the constellation Virgo in the sky. Because if God put the constellations in the sky for our benefit to tell the story of his plan, then obviously the constellation Virgo means something. Something happened to Mary, the Virgin, during that time period. And we see that in the story of Noah. I'll put that video up here, and we also see it in my video about Noah's pregnant year, the Shana Me Uberet. It's a Jewish leap year, and it means a pregnant year. So I'll put those 2 videos up there. But, okay, let's count back 6 months, which is the equivalent of 26 weeks, from the time that the constellation Virgo is in the sky. The sign for Virgo is between August 23rd and September 22nd. I am a Virgo. So the very last day of Virgo being the sign is going to be Tishri 10. You're going to see that on the next slide. But there's one other constraint that has to also be present for us to figure out the date, and that is the year has to be 3756. And I will tell you why in a little bit, but that is the equivalent of the year 6 BC. To figure out when Zacharias served, we need to figure out what is the last possible day for the constellation Virgo to be on the calendar, and that is going to be September 22nd, which is the equivalent of Tishri 10, because we know that Jesus was conceived under the sign of Virgo. So let's count up 26 weeks. So that's 6 months, because Mary conceived at Elizabeth's 6th month. And let's see when Zacharias served, and that will tell us when John the Baptist was conceived. So if we count up 26 weeks, all of a sudden you're in Nisan, and oh look, there's Passover, and that's the 14th through the 22nd, so he would have been serving at that time. And if John the Baptist was conceived after that, well, it's not the sign of Virgo anymore in the next 6 months. Now we need to go up a week. Okay, could he serve the 7th through the 14th? No, because that would have been back-to-back weeks, and again, in 6 months, it will not be Virgo, it will be Libra. Well, now we need to go up another week, and, well, you have to remember that John has to be home when it falls under the sign of Virgo in 6 months. So he's going to be working during that time. Again, that doesn't work. So we have to go all the way up to Adar 15th through the 23rd to see if there is an available spot where not only will the year be 3756 in 6 months, but it will also be the sign of Virgo. So when does that take place? It takes place right after the week of Adar 15th through the 23rd. That's when Zechariah would have worked. And then Adar 25 through Nisan 5, all of those dates work between having the year 3756 and also falling under the sign of Virgo in the next 6 months. So 6 months from now, it's going to be Virgo, and it's going to be the year 3756. Now that we have a window of time for the possible dates that John could have been conceived, and it's a pretty small window, it's only 10 days, we can start counting off from the earliest date and then the latest possible date that he could be conceived. We'll count out 26 weeks, and that will tell us when Mary conceived, because we know Mary conceived in Elizabeth's 6th month. So the earliest that Jesus could have been conceived is 26 weeks after Adar 25. So from Adar 25 to Nisan 3, that's one total week. So it's a Monday to a Monday. So now Nisan 3, that's week 1. Now we're going to count down 26 weeks, and that will put us at Tishri 1. And Tishri 1 is a special day because that is when the year finally becomes 3756, because the year changes on Rosh Hashanah, which is the head of the year. So the earliest day that Jesus could have been conceived is Rosh Hashanah of 3756. Now, okay, what if John the Baptist was conceived a little later in that window of time where it fits both parameters? Well, the latest date that he could have been conceived is Nisan 5. 1 week later would have been Wednesday, Nisan 12. So that is going to be the very first week. So we're going to count down 26 weeks. So that brings us to Tishri 10, which is the equivalent of September 22nd, the last day that Virgo is in the sky. Well, what is special about Tishri 10 in this year? Well, that date is Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement. So the earliest Jesus could have been conceived is Rosh Hashanah. The latest he could have been conceived is Yom Kippur. And if you notice, you'll see how Tishri 15th through the 22nd is yellow. That's because the week is Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, and that signifies that God is dwelling with us. So possibly the first or second week of Mary's pregnancy all of a sudden we're celebrating not only the head of the year and the Day of Atonement, but now we're celebrating that God is with us. And on Sukkot, people put up temporary dwellings because it reminds them that God is dwelling with us and that he's with us wherever we go, even in the desert like the Israelites lived in. And this is supposed to be a temporary dwelling place because we're looking forward to the city that we'll be living in when Jesus finally comes back, that permanent city that we've all been looking forward to, that we spoke about in the last video. I'll make sure to put a link up there about Abraham. So that is what's amazing. So Jesus is in Mary temporarily, and everybody is celebrating that God is with us. Isn't that amazing? When are you pregnant? Once you conceive. Not once you give birth, it's once you conceive. So God is now dwelling with us. So I was actually correct in my Rosh Hashanah video. Jesus was conceived in September. But there's something else, because I was driving in the car today and I was like, I know gematria, which is the numbers that Jews assign a meaning to. And I know that, okay, if Jesus was conceived in 6 BC, well, 6 is the Jewish number of a man. And that's when Jesus became a man. God became flesh. But, that's Roman numbering. That's not necessarily Jewish numbering. So let me think this through some more. So I go to my calendar, and what is the Hebrew year that is the equivalent of 6 BC? Well, it's 3, 7, 5, 6. And you know what 3, 7, 5, 6 is? It's a Shana Me'uberet. It's one of these Jewish pregnant years. So Mary became pregnant during a Shana Me'uberet. Mary became pregnant during a pregnant year. Okay, well that's really interesting. And we know that 6 BC, 6 is the number of a man. But what does 3, 7, 5, 6 mean? 3 is the symbol of God. 7 is the symbol of God's completeness. 5 is the symbol of God's law. 6 is the symbol of man. God completed the law and man when Jesus became conceived. God completed the law. What did Jesus say he did? He came to complete the law. And what did he do? He redeemed man. Man has been completed. Yeah, 3, 7, 5, 6. My face about melted off. So we see that Jesus was conceived the week before Sukkot under the sign of the Virgin in the year 3756, which symbolizes God's completion of the law and man. Okay, so Herod was installed by the Romans in 39 BC, and the Magi supposedly came to him in 34 BC, so that gives us a year of 5 BC when the Magi came. If Jesus was born in June of 5 BC or 3756, we have another 40 days for Mary to be purified. She goes to the temple, she meets Anna. So now it's later in the year for 3756. Now Rosh Hashanah rolls around, and it is still the year 5 BC, and this is when the Magi come. It's 5 BC, Herod's 34th year, and Herod freaks out because there's going to be a new Jewish king, and he's been fighting off people so that he can get Octavius's love and support, basically, after his best buddy Mark Antony was defeated by Octavius. So Herod wants to keep his kingdom, so he is going to kill anybody who stands in his way. So that had to have happened in 5 BC. The Magi came, they gave Jesus gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Joseph is told in a dream to go to Egypt. They take all of that money and they go live in Egypt for years. And I know that it's years because in 4 BC, that is when Herod's sons begin reigning, even though their father is not dead yet. So when they are ruling in 1 AD, they backdate or antedate the beginning of their reign to 4 BC. So Herod was still calling the shots in 5 BC. His sons were really calling the shots in 4 BC, but Herod wasn't dead yet. So when Herod finally died, that's when Jesus came back from Egypt to fulfill another prophecy. But all signs point to Jesus being conceived in 6 BC and being born in 5 BC, and that all takes place during the Jewish year of 3756, which is a Shana Me'uberet, which is a pregnant year. So Jesus was conceived and carried during a pregnant year while Mary was pregnant. He was conceived under the sign of Virgo. The very first week of his conception, that first full week of pregnancy, was the week of Sukkot, which is tabernacles. God is dwelling with us in a temporary dwelling place. Pregnancy is temporary. Being a person is temporary because we are spiritual beings. We know that God will have his reign and rule forever, the city that we're looking forward to in the future, where it's a permanent thing. So we see the symbolism here, 3756, God completing the law in man. So again, everything points to Jesus being conceived the week before Sukkot of 3756. So that's all that I wanted to share with you. I know that there's so many different ideas about when he was born, when he was conceived, but when I did all of the calculations, nothing matched up except for this. So I'm going to run with it, and I hope that inspired you, because I've never, ever, ever heard anybody talk about those two things, the constellation and the Shana Me'uberet, during this time. So again, I wanted to share that with you. I hope you enjoy that, and I would love it if you would like, subscribe, and share, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.